The black bird seemed to fear the white rhino, and when it approached the cactus, the bird made a quick escape. With a strange hacking caw, it screeched at the white rhino. The white rhino merely ignored the bird and instead closed its eyes to rest near the cactus. Storm clouds began to form high above, which surprised Han Sen. The clouds were exactly the same as the ones he had seen before. The scary life force that swirled in the atmosphere accompanied it, also. With all three creatures gathering here, it seemed as if all their purposes were connected to the cactus. The white flower that crowned the cactus had a strangely aromatic fragrance. It was lovely, and it incited a weird reaction inside Han Sen's body. He felt as if he was getting high. Is this cactus similar to the peach tree? Han Sen was delightfully surprised. He was ecstatic at his fortune to witness something such as this once again, but felt slight trepidation regarding the union of the three terrifyingly powerful super creatures. There was every chance that the white rhino would not be willing to hurt them, considering how mellow it had been thus far. But as for the bird and cloud, he wasn't so sure. But this isn't what worried Han Sen the most. If he had to protect himself, he could use the little angel and perhaps command the fairy. Yet this was an exotic occurrence and not something easily encountered. He didn't want to simply leave this place empty-handed. If a few goodies were up for grabs, he was all for taking them. It just concerned him that the currently docile rhino might later consider him an enemy, too. But it was still early yet, and Han Sen absorbed the flower's smell to practice the Dongshuan Sutra. With each passing day, the scent of the flower grew stronger. But on the fifth day, that smell finally began to subside and fade. Han Sen could see a wrinkled fruit growing in the bosom of the flower as an endless vat of life force swirled within. It really is something special. The life force inside the fruit greatly interested him. If he could eat it, perhaps he could fully unlock his first tier of the Dongshuan Sutra. But the black flame bird and cloud-shrouded creature did not keep their distance as much as they once did, and they slowly drew closer. Let's go. Han Sen saw the fruit on the cactus growing bigger and bigger, and now that it was nearly ripe, he bid for Zhu Yume to leave. The fruit on that cactus looks to be some good stuff. Shouldn't we hang around and have a bite of it? Zhu Yume was not dumb, and she could tell the fruit was quite the prize. Aren't you afraid of being trampled to death? Wait for me here, do not go anywhere. Han Sen took Zhu Yume a good distance away and left her some supplies. The silver fox and little orange were to stay with her as well. He returned to the cactus, only bringing the fairy with him. Facing those terrifying super creatures, only the fairy, an adult super creature, could fight back. Han Sen watched them for 2 days, and slowly, the fruit was beginning to mature. It made the black phoenix and cloud-wrapped creature antsy and anxious. A crack developed on the top of the fruit, and out of it, a purple gas seeped. It was like a dream, and it enveloped the entire fruit. The rhino glowed with a holy light, and its giant body began to fly. It ascended towards the purple haze. The black flame phoenix screeched loudly, flapped its fiery wings, and released terrifying heat waves. Fight. Come on, fight. Han Sen encouraged them to fight in his heart. He wanted them out of the way so he could nab the loot for himself. The black flame phoenix and the cloud creature were incredibly angry, and they roared in rage. But still, they did not dare get close to the rhino. Oh no, how can you two do this to me? It should be 2 versus 1, how can they sit back and watch? Han Sen's jaw almost unhinged itself. The rhino, however, opened its mouth wide and leaned forward to eat the wrinkled fruit that was shrouded in a purple mist. The phoenix and cloud only continued to scream at the rhino, remaining where they were. Han Sen was expecting the crazy spectacle of a super battle, but nothing of the like occurred. The white rhino swallowed the fruit and missed unopposed, while the phoenix and cloud did not move a single inch the entire time. The black flame phoenix and cloud watched the rhino eat the fruit but did not leave. It looked as if they were waiting for something, and this made Han Sen curious. The white rhino ate the fruit, what are they waiting for? Is the cactus edible? It shouldn't be, since it's full of thorns, Han Sen thought. Han Sen looked at the white rhino, thinking something must be wrong. The holy light of the rhino was getting brighter and brighter, and it did not slow down. It was blasting out of its body like multiple searchlights. The white rhino's jade-like skin began to crack like dry mud. Blood poured out of its breaking skin. Oh no, did the rhino consume too many nutrients at once? Perhaps his body can't take that much, and it's going to destroy him. Han Sen's eyes almost fell from his sockets at the sight. In that scary, holy light, the skin of the rhino continued to crack. Within a second, the white rhino had become a red rhino. It was like a monster from hell, having just taken part in a bloodbath. The white rhino screamed to the sky, as if it was talking to the creator above. More and more holy light beamed out of it, and then, it unleashed a mini atom bomb some distance away. The black flame phoenix flapped its wings frantically, and it seemed tempted to approach the rhino. The cloud had already decided to descend, as a thunder rumbled within it. It looked very interested in what was happening to the rhino. Hansen's mind was in a mess, trying to guess what was going on. The black phoenix and the cloud hardly moved now, remaining where they were and watching the rhino's body break down. Hansen was patiently waiting, as well. He still hoped he could grab a few treats out of this entire affair. Seeing the white rhino's blood oozing into the black sand, Hansen felt pretty bad. Not for the reasons you might think, however. He thought all that bleeding was a great loss, and Hansen could only imagine what such large, powerful quantities of blood might do for his death knell. Heaven knew how much it'd evolve. If this was going to happen, why did it so greedily want to eat the fruit? It's like it chose to self-destruct. Hansen sighed. He believed death was the only conclusion to the rhino's current suffering. Hansen frowned, but as he did so, he heard a mix of noises. It sounded like an army was approaching. He turned around to take a look and jumped. Along the ground and even from the skies above, countless creatures were running his way. Hansen could see insects, birds, and animals of all varieties coming towards him. They were everywhere. They were all coming for the now fleshless rhino like a tsunami. Hansen quickly summoned his little angel and prepared for a fight. It was to be a hot and sweaty battle, with the number of opponents headed his way. But the creatures ignored him. They all raced past him, with an insatiable lust for the white rhino. Hansen had seen most of these creatures before, and they weren't particularly high-class creatures or anything. They were a mixture of ordinary, mutant, and sacred blood-class creatures. It looked as if they had been summoned by something. As Hansen watched them rush there, he suddenly heard the frightening sound of a gargantuan bird ring out. He turned around to see a black hellfire rain from the sky to incinerate countless numbers of the newly come creatures. Thunder also sounded from inside the dark clouds, and netted webs of green lightning formed to ensnare and char those below. With no regard for themselves, the approaching creatures seemed to happily throw their lives away for the chance to reach the rhino. The two scary super creatures above were halting all who dared approach. The black flames of cruelty and the green lightning of savagery prevented the coming of everything. Not one of the creatures stampede got close to the rhino. Hansen, spectacle aside, thought the entire event to be a little strange. He wondered why, despite their prevention of others from eating the white rhino, did they not go and eat the rhino themselves? If it was because they thought the white rhino was not dead yet, they could have at least let the little creatures go first. But they didn't, and instead, they stopped every little creature from approaching the dying white rhino. The white rhino, that was only tattered skin on bones now, roared again. It was weak and strained, and lacked all the power it once had. It didn't strike fear into the heart as it once had, and instead made those who heard it want to cry. A tear left the white rhino's lifeless eyes. A tiny little light appeared on the rhino's horns, like a star from the sky. Slowly, the light grew brighter and brighter on the horn. Soon after, it ignited the entire horn into flame. The white rhino roared to the sky again. It was like it was declaring war, standing in defiance of a wretched fate. The holy fire was like a volcanic eruption, and it lit up the entire desert brightly. Although the light was bright, it did not harm your eyes to look on it. It was warm and accepting. While Hansen watched the flames, the bones crumbled away like petals from flowers. As the bones were shaved away, the beast became smaller and the light grew brighter. The bones that remained shone like jade. It wasn't long before its size was equal to that of an average earth rhino. Its bones had been refined into transparent crystals, through which coursed a holy light. Within that holy light, Hansen was able to witness something utterly unbelievable. The bones were birthing new flesh. Skin and flesh returned, as if the rhino was being reborn. The only difference from its previous appearance was its smaller size, yet despite that, its holy presence and aura were stronger than ever. Snowflakes now descended from the sky, and upon closer inspection, Hansen realized he was wrong. It wasn't snow, but the luminous dandelions that had returned, bearing the image of snowfall descending across the desert. The luminous dandelions landed on the creatures and faded into their skin. It imbued them with a holy aura as well. He held one in his hand, and it smoothly faded into his fingers. A cleansing energy coursed through his body as if it was washing him clean. What level has this rhino evolved to? Hansen looked at the rhino with wonder and surprise. The holy rhino called to the sky again, and the holy light inside it was like a volcanic eruption. A holy light shot upwards into the sky like a heavensward beam. Boom! The holy light reached the zenith of the world, and in that place, a mysterious metal door appeared. Strange symbols and transcriptions appeared upon the door, and gears and cogwheels adorned it. Slowly, the door opened. It opened only slightly before a horrid feeling rushed out. It was a malevolent force that made things feel as if the sky was going to quickly descend and crush the world below. All the creatures were knocked down to the ground, the black flame phoenix and green Kirin included. Hansen and the little fairy also suffered, feeling as if they had suddenly been crushed by the very atmosphere. Only the holy rhino stood its ground, standing still in defiance as its holy light shone as a beacon. With peaceful, graceful eyes, it looked at the door high above. By the shelters. What is going on? What is that metal door? Hansen froze as he watched. Everything that had transpired thus far had gone against all his wildest expectations. As the door slowly opened, what was behind it was a blur. Try as he might, his vision could not pierce that veil and see what lay beyond. He could see something faint, but nothing with vivid detail. He believed he had seen a human body exit the blur behind the door frame. Are there humans inside there? Hansen was gobsmacked, not expecting a human to exit such a curiously hidden metal door. But Hansen could not be entirely sure that whatever had come out was indeed a human. The details were scant, and it was only the being's humanoid shape he could make out. But the energy it released was terrifying. It was oppressive, and it gave Hansen the feeling that he should kowtow before it. Gazing at it with his lowly human eyes, Hansen was stricken with the feeling that his actions were blasphemous and that he wasn't worthy of the sight. The shadow departed the emptiness, with 1 foot outside the door. Hansen forced himself to take a closer look at the door, and he saw a leg plated in black metal. It looked frighteningly powerful, and it gave the feeling that the leg would crack the world asunder if it ever touched the ground. Quickly, the body exited the door in full, and Hansen was now able to see it clearly. It was a man clad in black armor. He looked cold, but handsome. He looked hallowed. All that his eyes saw would have been inconsequential to him. His body possessed a horrid aura, one that suggested all who looked upon him should cower in fear. Even the rhino, that was standing still the entire time, lowered its head at his coming. Hansen was shocked at what he was seeing and knew that person could not be a true human. Hansen saw black wings on his back, and they weren't beast souls. They looked to be a part of him. "Will you follow me along the path of evolution?" the man said with a cold tone of voice, looking at the rhino. The rhino responded to the man. Then, it began flying towards the metal door. Hovering beside the man, it turned around to look at the desert as if it was going to miss the place. The man had a smile, and then he brought the rhino to leave. He casually looked around and seemed surprised. Just as he was preparing to lead the rhino through the door, he scanned the creatures on the ground. Hansen could suddenly feel that the man's eyes were aimed at him, and there was no chance of him being mistaken about that. Oh no, why would I even bother looking at him? This man is bringing whoever he wants. Even super creatures would not dare look at him. It seems all I ever do is look for trouble. Hansen wanted to slap himself. Earlier, things seemed to be proceeding without trouble for him. But Hansen realized his foolishness in looking the man's way, and now, the mysterious man had him in his sights. Hansen felt incredibly nervous. If he could have run away, he would have done so in a heartbeat. But he wasn't the only one still pinned down to the ground, as the fairy, Black Flame Phoenix, and Green Kirin were, too. After seeing Hansen where he lay, the man looked upon him with interest. With a finger, he pointed at him. A black laser beam fell on Hansen's head. Oh no, is this it? Am I going to die? Hansen used all his strength to try to dodge out of the way, but try as he might, he could not move an inch. Boom. The beam of light struck Hansen's head, and his heart felt cold for a second. It's karma. I've been smacking people's heads all my life. Now, it is my turn to be smacked in the head. Maybe I deserve this. Can I not even tell my family goodbye? Hansen felt so sad in his heart, but it was then like nothing happened. The beam of light did not crush his skull as expected. He felt no pain at all. It was as if the beam of light was nothing but an illusion. "You are my man." The man lifted his lips as he spoke, then turned around and departed beyond the metal door. The holy rhino followed him inside, and then the door shut. As slowly as it first appeared, it now disappeared into nothingness. Hansen was finally able to move, and the first thing he did was quickly touch his head. Much to his relief, his head was firm, warm, and whole. He was super pleased, and so he thought, my head is still here. I am not dead. But a second later, he spared no time for celebration. He summoned his golden roarer, and with the fairy alongside, rode over to the sand crater. It wasn't just Hansen who went there, either. All the creatures, Black Flame Phoenix and Green Kirin included, raced forward. There were some bones and flesh that had been left behind by the rhino. It was the meat of a top super creature, and clearly the aim of everyone's desire. The Black Flame Phoenix and Green Kirin sprinted there, firing flame and thunder as they went. Any creature that attempted to steal from them, they killed mercilessly. Hansen had the little angel and fairy to protect him, however, and quickly he leapt towards the mound of flesh. He summoned his death knell and lobbed it into the blood. An idea then sprang upon Hansen, and he chucked the gourd in there, too. The fairy took the time to grab a bite to eat, too. Her little mouth worked incredibly quickly to gobble down decent chunks of meat. The little angel had her fair share, as well. So, Hansen then summoned Meowth and let it dine on some. Hansen was currently regretting his decision to leave the silver fox behind. If that little silver black hole was here, it would be in ecstasy at the prospect of all this food. Hansen lay on the ground to have a sip of the blood, but after giving it a taste, quickly spat it all out. The blood was like acid, and it almost melted his entire mouth and tongue. What is this? Can only creatures consume this? Hansen was disheartened, seeing all the other creatures jovially eat to their heart's content. The little angel had no problem, either. It was only Hansen who was not able to take part in eating the rhino's remains. Hansen's heart was incredibly sad, and his inability to eat the meat drove him nuts. Suddenly, Hansen remembered a tear had fallen from the rhino. The tear seemed as if it had solidified, and he wondered if it was still there. After a while, his hands touched something circular. With a quick rebound of joy and excitement, he pulled it up. It was indeed the rhino's teardrop. It was transparent and about the size of a fist. Although it came out of the blood, it hadn't been stained by it. Strange, considering Hansen's hand was all mucky with the blood it had been submerged in. Hansen held the tear and felt a lot of energy coursing around inside it. The item itself felt incredibly holy. Merely holding it soothed his being, as if being in its proximity cleansed him. Now this is some good stuff. Hansen was ecstatic, and he carefully pocketed the tear. Hansen pulled out a bag and placed some meat inside it, so he could offer it to the silver fox when he returned. He couldn't let the silver fox, the creature that loved to eat so much, go without this sort of food. Hansen picked up his gourd from the wet sand, and it appeared to have been dyed red, and it had a much more attractive look to it. Naturally, Hansen assumed it had indeed absorbed much blood. The bluebell, on the other hand, was adorned with a number of red etchings of a variety of different symbols. Hansen was unable to discern what they meant. However, Meowth had stuffed its belly full, and it was incredibly bloated. With its beach ball-shaped stomach, all it could do was lie on the ground and gasp for breath. The silver fox, seeing Hansen approach, took off in a speedy run to greet him. Hansen reached out his hand to grab the silver fox, but the silver fox dodged right past it and went for the bag instead. He leapt up, tore the bag open, and began to gobble up the meat Hansen had risked his life to bring him. What a heartless bastard. He senses meat and cares not for the master that painstakingly lugged it all the way over here. Little Orange came over to the pile of meat as well. It leapt around joyously but was not so rude as to eat the meat without permission. Wanting to form a greater bond with the creature, he grabbed a slab of meat and fed it to the kitty. Little Orange excitedly jumped around and then began to devour the meat ecstatically. The white rhino died. The creatures came over to devour its corpse. I managed to collect some of its meat on my return. Hansen did not indulge her with the details of what had transpired. This is the rhino's flesh. When Zhu Yume heard what the meat was, she looked surprised. Then, she took a moment of silence for the deceased creature. After that, she popped back into her bubbly self and asked, "Oh, big brother dearest, might I request some of that flesh?" Zhu Yume knew that the rhino was something special. Sacred blood creatures could not compare with it. She knew that very well. The flesh of such a beast had to be something quite remarkable. If Hansen had agreed to give Little Orange a slab, she thought he'd most certainly provide her with one or two. "You can eat? Yes. But first, you must sign this. Sign this, and you can eat as much as you want." Hansen pulled out an IU form. Fine, whatever. Zhu Yume had already accumulated much debt while traveling with Hansen. After a brief scan of the document, and not seeing anything particularly trapping, she hastily signed it. After signing it, she happily ran towards the bag of meat in the belief she had earned herself quite the prize, and for a small price, too. Not often could you purchase such incredible flesh. But when Zhu Yume took a bite, her face turned green and she spat it all out. She ran back to Hansen and pointed her finger at him, shouting, "You lied to me. This isn't the white rhino's meat." "I did not lie. If you don't believe me, why don't you go ask your precious Little Orange? Don't you see him there, eating it so merrily? If it isn't the white rhino's meat, why else would it keep eating?" Hansen pointed to Little Orange and offered his explanation. Zhu Yume thought Hansen might have been right, as Little Orange rarely ate sacred blood meat. That meat must have been quite special for Little Orange to go crazy for it. "Little Orange, bite him." Zhu Yume gritted her teeth and bid for Little Orange to commit an act of revenge on her behalf. Little Orange ran towards Hansen, but he just stood there unmoving. Within a second, Little Orange leapt onto him. Meow. When Little Orange leapt in front of Hansen, he landed gently. With his fluffy head, he brushed against Hansen multiple times. He meowed all the while. Good boy. Hansen stroked Little Orange's head and provided him with another slice of meat. Traitor. Little Orange, you traitor. How can you let this terrible man buy your love? What traitor? Like a little darling sparrow selecting a tree to settle down in, kiddies know which master they should settle for. Hansen spoke his bit in a boisterous, cocky manner, and he stroked Little Orange as he did so. Hansen knew Little Orange wasn't being nice, however. He knew as soon as the meat was gone, he'd run back to be with Shuyume. Shuyume was speechless, despite her fuming anger. Suddenly, she calmed, though. She pointed at Hansen's forehead and started laughing, saying, I'm a good girl. I won't fight with men. And I especially won't do it with you, who is half a man and half a woman. How old are you, huh? And you're using rouge on your forehead. I'm not going to fight someone like that. What rouge? Hansen's heart jumped. Quickly, he touched his forehead. Hansen pulled out a mirror from his pack, the one that was used for the beetle night, and had a look. Hansen's face dropped. On his forehead, between his eyebrows, there was a single red dot. He tried to rub it away, but it was as if it had been branded. No matter how much he scrubbed, it wouldn't go away. Hansen took a closer look. The red dot was on the surface of his skin, but it was as stubborn as if it was embedded within. Removing it anytime soon didn't seem likely. Hansen then thought about the spirit that had stepped from beyond that metal door and the things it had said. As soon as his mind reflected upon those events, an uneasy feeling began to swell. If I am guessing this correctly, that spirit must have come from the third shelter. The holy rhino must have been taken there. But why would he stop to place a mark on me? Hansen frowned, unable to figure out what had happened. Right now, Hansen wanted to be gone from the Black Desert once and for all. He was burning with inquisitiveness, so he wanted to return to civilization and get to asking about the third shelter. He cast his Dongshuan Sutra to see if he could absorb it, but the Dongshuan Sutra did not work as expected. Despite his simulation of the rhino's energy flow, there was a different reaction. The tear in his hand melted into a holy water of sorts, which soaked into his body. As curious as this was, he did not receive a Geno increase announcement. This disappointed him, but the tear was like a holy light that cleansed his every cell. His skin began to peel as dirt rose to the surface and was thrown away. After this process began, Hansen could peel large films of his skin away. It was as if he was shedding, and every time he removed some of his old, now dead skin, more dirt would appear and be cleansed away. After doing this 4 times, his body was put at great ease and a comfort he never knew existed. Now he felt as if he had previously suffered a flu and a wretchedly stuffed nose to go along with it. But now he had fully healed. Although his fitness did not increase, his first gene lock was blown wide open, and that came as a shock. Although he hadn't reached a fitness of 300 and become a celestial being, he could already unleash his true power. This made him exuberantly happy. It was a shame Shuyume was with him, because he fancied giving his new powers a spin. Good men always receive good rewards. Hansen could not stop repeating this phrase to himself. After walking for a dozen days, his eyes met with the sight of the Gobi Desert and a nearby mountain. This made Hansen and Shuyume incredibly happy, for they had now, at long last, exited the Black Desert. Hansen quickened their pace and desire for a shelter. He wanted to return to the Alliance and find out all he could about the third shelter. Shuyume almost leapt for joy. Bad guy, you can't threaten me anymore, Shuyume said to Hansen in a mocking tone. She then bounced up and down in childish glee. Once we arrive, prepare the sum of money you owe me. I have the stack of IOUs here, sealed and signed. Don't even think about trying to duck and dodge your way out of paying me, Hansen coldly said. Shuyume stuck out her tongue at Hansen and turned in a huff to walk in the direction of the shelter. Not long after, Jai Yanran visited Hansen's room with Annie in tow. Annie, tell Hansen about the situation in the third god's sanctuary. Annie looked at Hansen and with a muddled expression, said, the reason why the Alliance prevents surpassers from discussing the third god's sanctuary is because we are the lowest tier of the third god's sanctuary inhabitants. The real masters of the third god's sanctuary are spirits, and they rule the place. No way. Shouldn't there be 1,000,000 human surpassers living there? Hansen was shocked at this revelation. There are 1,000,000, yes, but they are lost and scattered across the third god's sanctuary. Encountering another human is rare, and you'd be fortunate to encounter just one in a journey that spans the distance between 10 shelters. That's pretty grim, Hansen said with a wry smile. Annie suddenly gave a complicated smile and said, grim. You think that's grim? That's not the half of it. When humans enter the third god's sanctuary, they are all sent to a shelter. If they don't end up at a human shelter, you know where they end up, don't you? Spirit shelters. How is that possible? Hansen's eyes opened wide, unable to comprehend what such a scene might look like. going there sounds very much like a death sentence. The million evolvers surviving there must be fiercely strong. Han Sen had a wry smile. Strong. Again, I must tell you that you are wrong. They bring shame to the human race, Annie coldly said. Eking out a living for yourself in the third god's sanctuary can only be done in 3 different ways. First, you might end up being sent to a bottom-tier spirit shelter. Spirits and creatures roam there, but if you can escape, then you live. Secondly, you can be sent to a human shelter and be safe from the get-go. Annie stopped for a moment, but then continued by saying, as tough as the first option may be, the second one is by no means easy to achieve. Human shelters are a rarity. Compared to the countless spirit shelters, the number humans own is very small. It is rare to end up at ordinary spirit shelters too, due to most having been destroyed by competing spirits. When conquered, they aren't taken over. They are put into ruin and left like so. Inferior shelters are quickly overcome by greater ones. You mentioned 3 different possibilities. Han Sen frowned, understanding the third had to be the most important. Yes, there is one other option, and that is to concede to the rule of spirits. You can sign a contract with them, pledging allegiance and fealty to their rule. A forfeiture of your life, as it were, Annie calmly said. Han Sen's reaction, however, was anything but. He was aghast. That was why the Alliance didn't make the situation there known to others. In the third god's sanctuary, humans are made slaves, more often than not. All I can assuredly tell you is, if you do end up at a bottom-tier spirit shelter, then congratulations. You'll most likely live. They are interracial, and if you do sign a contract with those, you will be treated as a fair member of their society. Only if it was a higher class shelter might you be offered a contract to submit yourself to slavery. When that spirit brought the rhino to the third god's sanctuary, it must have espied the power within Han Sen and thus marked him. In the future, it would most likely bring Han Sen with it, also. Of course, it was only a mark. It wasn't as if a genuine contract had been signed. Contracts were only signed if both parties agreed. Still, signing a contract with a spirit is not all bad. There may be benefits to such a thing, Jai Yanran said. What benefits would there be? Han Sen asked with surprise. The first god's sanctuary and second god's sanctuary require you to kill creatures in order to increase your fitness. In the third god's sanctuary, aside from fitness, you must also open your gene locks. There are 2 ways to unlock gene locks. First is through the hyper geno art you learn. The second method of unlocking a gene lock is to get spirit geno points from a spirit. If one spirit has unlocked 3 of its gene locks, you can receive 100 spirit geno points off them. This will allow you to unlock 1 gene lock. It takes 300 spirit geno points to unlock 3 locks. The power you get from unlocking gene locks will be the same as spirits receive. Your element in hyper geno art does not matter. In the eyes of spirits, humans are no greater than the creatures they generally command. They will treat you as they do creatures, and the spirits treat creatures as they do you. They provide creatures with spirit geno points, but the higher tier spirits make it harder for you to obtain their spirit geno points. That being said, some humans have been known to unlock 8 of their gene locks with spirit geno points. I wonder what level the spirit that took the rhino was, Han Sen thought to himself. During Han Sen's time back in the Alliance, Councilman Zhu contacted the Jai family. He and his family were incredibly appreciative of Han Sen's effort to lead his daughter safely out of the Black Desert. In return, they sent them many expensive gifts. It looks like Xu Yume is quite important in her family. I don't think this appreciation stems from her position in the family. I'd wager they're more concerned with her ownership of a pet super creature. If it grows up, it'd be incredibly powerful and that would indeed assert her as a prominent figure. Han Sen then proceeded to tell Jai Yanran the story of Han Sen's meeting and subsequent adventure with Xu Yume and Little Orange. Is such a thing possible? This is a big opportunity. I have to provide my family with this information. Jai Yanran and Annie had their eyes wide open. If you like pets, I can give you one. Han Sen laughed. Annie rolled her eyes, not believing what Han Sen told her. The child of a super creature would be incredibly powerful, and raising one was sure to be harder than killing one. Xu Yume was just incredibly lucky, she assumed. Achieving ownership of one would be no easy task. Han Sen was preparing to go out when he received a message saying he should expect another visitor. When Han Sen heard this, he frowned. Visitors weren't permitted there, so he thought it was strange to hear someone was coming to see him. Who might it be, I wonder? Han Sen had a few guesses, but he couldn't count on any. Ordinary people were not allowed to enter the base, so he made his way to the reception area. Thank you for watching. Subscribe and enable notifications so you don't miss the next chapter.